Hello, welcome to Soulprint Intuitive Tarot. I'm so glad you've joined me today. It is February 26th. Again, I thank you again for the lovely response to the deep trance reading. For those of you who were really intrigued by it and have not yet checked out Soulprint Insights, I encourage you to do so. Because there is channeled information on there, but that channel really is specifically geared to spiritual guidance, insights, and growth. So feel free to check that out if you have not yet. And just one more housekeeping note. I have been getting some requests for a reading on Canadian politics. Right now, as I'm sure some of you are aware, there are roadblocks, actually there are train blocks across the railroad tracks and sort of beside the railroad tracks that are being staged by hereditary chiefs and their supporters with regards to a pipeline expansion, an oil pipeline expansion. So I am getting to that. It's going to show up sometimes, probably later on this week. I have not forgotten about Canada. The reality is that what's going on in the United States just potentially is so much more worrisome. It's not only the fact that there's a primaries and caucuses going on, and the Democrats are trying to get themselves organized, figure out who is going to get the presidential nomination. But there's a lot of stuff going on that's actually really concerning in the United States. Trump has dismantled the very department, or whatever it's called, agency, I guess, that would be in charge of the response to the coronavirus. Because he just, he dismantled it 2 years ago. I mean, that kind of stuff's not important, for goodness sakes. And, the CDC is now saying, you know what, Americans, you better get, on board, because this could end up being really bad. Expect sort of a significant spread within your country. Now, Canada does have, I think it's 11 or 12 cases of the coronavirus right now. But if there is a big expansion, if you will, of that virus showing up in the United States, as its northern neighbor, that is also concerning. So there's just feels as if energetically there's some stuff going on that the United States just simply needs to be my focus. Hold on a second, I'm choking. Alrighty then. So today's reading is just going to be a little bit different, as you can probably tell from the title. But of course, it does have that sort of political feel and energy to it. So yesterday, Harvey Weinstein was convicted of 2, possibly 3, I think it was 2, counts in that rape trial. He faces another one in Los Angeles. And now, from what I understand, some of the women that he, basically said were lying are now going to go after him for a defamation suit. So good, like really good. So I wanted to take a look at the MeToo movement, but sort of specifically as it relates and connects to Trump and the problems he has had in his past, and how literally Harvey's conviction is sitting with Trump and perhaps other members of, other high-ranking officials within the government who are involved, like Jim Jordan. While not being accused, he is being accused of being flat out negligent because he knew what was going on at that university and did nothing to prevent it or stop it. So I just want to take a look at sort of how the energy around that conviction is shaping up. Okay, so come on down. I have a question. So let's tell me, what can we find out about the Me Too movement, the conviction of Weinstein and Trump? One more quick shuffle. And here we go. Trump, MeToo conviction. Trump, MeToo conviction. Trump, MeToo conviction. It's interesting. I heard that as good old Harvey there was being led out of the courthouse in, shackles. He just kept saying, but I'm innocent, but I'm innocent. How could this happen? I'm innocent. So that sort of gives you a little bit, honestly, of the mindset that we're dealing with here. They come from that generation and that time where they really felt that kind of behavior was acceptable. It was their God-given right. And, there is that energy that just sort of says, basically, I've always done this. Why all of a sudden, is it wrong? It's that kind of a feel. And again, there are sexual assaults that go on all the time. I am not exclusively saying it is the purview of that sort of older generation, but I'm feeling like it was sort of more acceptable. And as everybody knows, rape tends to not be an act of sex. It is an act of power and dominance. So this is what we have here. There really, here, this is what I'm talking about. There really is that sense that I can take what I want, I can steal what I want. You don't have a right to argue with me because I am bigger, I am stronger, I am more powerful, I control your fate. And that is an energy that, thank you, God, is starting to dissipate. And what you're sort of going to see almost like a division between that older attitude of Trump and Weinstein and the whole bunch of them, Cosby, who really felt that they were entitled, they were privileged, that this was simply within their right, versus some of the stuff you see now, which is really more about violence and anger. But and God knows I'm not excusing them. What I'm saying is it's kind of just an attitude that prevailed within the time frames that they were growing up and were becoming successful and were functioning within the business world and the movie industry world and every other, area of life. So the attitude is starting to diminish, partly because some of these old dinosaurs are dying finally, and partly because the Me Too movement has been absolutely instrumental in creating an environment where people are starting to have a great deal of awareness, and women are standing in their strength, and they are saying that is enough, no more. We're not going to tolerate forced sex, but even more, we're not going to tolerate innuendo. We're not going to tolerate crude remarks. We're going to put a stop to this behavior of treating women as a commodity that can be simply used for a man's pleasure. And I am not discounting the fact that male rape happens and goes on. And again, that is also sort of included in this because it is the attitude of possessing somebody, having control over somebody, taking advantage of somebody because you are in a position to do so. That is what is being fractured and is starting to crumble down. And everyone needs to just take a moment and send some love and light and energy to the Me Too movement and to the victims, so that the healing can begin, and more importantly, so that the movement continues to gain strength and gain momentum. And because of this conviction, it just doesn't sort of fritter away almost as if like, well, I've done my job. It's going to continue to build, and it's going to continue to gain momentum. And you're going to hear more and more about people who are removed from their positions because of this behavior. And, and certainly it went on in Hollywood, and honestly, it went on in a lot of like television networks, whether it was their on-air personalities or it was within management. Yeah, for a long time there was just that sense that, I can do it and I can get away with it, and no one's going to frankly believe you if you speak out. And what this conviction yesterday absolutely proved is even the difficult cases that are hard to get convictions on can be won. And that in fact, you know what? Yeah, you absolutely are going to be heard and you're absolutely going to be believed. And it doesn't matter if that someone that you had that experience or were attacked by is someone in power. They're going to start coming down. Because, I think in a lot of ways, everybody was sort of waiting to find out what was going to happen in Harvey's case, because there was that sense of if we don't win this, it's same old, despite the movement. And because it has come through as a victory for the women, not only involved in that case, but sort of broadly speaking, it is going to continue to grow and continue to support the victims of that kind of abuse. And with the conviction, there is healing. Broken hearts are now going to be able to start the long journey into healing. And frankly, that's heartwarming, right? It's really nice to know with the conviction, with support, some of that very difficult healing can start. More importantly, what it does is it signals to women or victims who are still quiet, who are still not talking about it. It gives them the strength and encouragement to kind of move forward. And don't kid yourself, this is not about the United States exclusively. This is about the world. This has had a ripple effect throughout the world, where in countries where that kind of behavior is not acceptable or tolerated. And I am mindful, frankly, of the fact that there are some countries where that kind of sexual dominance and abuse is still considered normal. Those are countries where women have basically left less rights than, I don't know, anything, nothing, right? I mean, they have no rights. But in time, that too is going to start shifting and changing. But for some of those other countries, it's going to be a long journey still. So, yeah, it's going to continue to move forward. It has basically put an end to an attitude that was prevalent, and that attitude is now going through it's a bit shell-shocked, and it's going through a bit of a rebirth, right? That which was acceptable is no longer acceptable. That which was considered normal is no longer normal. So, let's take a look at this specifically as it pertains to Trump and Washington. And let's not forget that Trump has faced many, many accusations. And there have even been accusations or suggestions from ex-wives that he also has that sort of dominating, I'm entitled to this and I will get it because I say I'm special. Epstein, okay, that's another example of women as commodities, or the less fortunate as commodities, because certainly when it comes to human trafficking and that kind of thing, nobody is exempt. No sex is exempt. Here we go. Trump's reaction to conviction. Trump's reaction to conviction. Trump's reaction to conviction. And he, as I understand it, is in India right now. Or he was yesterday, the day before, something like that. Okay, so one of the ways that in the past, not only countries, but religions, powerful organizations, one of the ways that they controlled people was to have not only strong opinions and attitudes, but frankly, rules and laws about what sexual activities between what people were and were not unacceptable and acceptable. What behavior was deemed, appropriate and what behavior is deemed inappropriate. And certainly, for example, while the LGBTQ community has made great strides, there is still much work to be done. While the MeToo movement has made great strides, there is still much work to be done. And frankly, it feels very much like the whole human trafficking aspect has really almost become bigger than it was, or certainly more well known than it was. But I think that part of the weird sort of spin-off of this is that people who are in power, people who have the money, people who have the means to basically command whatever it takes to, frankly, satisfy some of their perversions, because that's what it is when you're talking about human trafficking. They, as more and more people sort of have gotten caught and it's become more public and it's becoming really apparent that it is not approved of. So what it looks like is happening is those who are less fortunate, those who are more at risk, are becoming more and more victimized because, and I'm getting a really strong feeling here of Epstein, because, there's this sense that, well, if we take these people, if we buy these people, if we make them into a commodity, and we keep it all very hush-hush and secret, then we can continue on with our fun and games. And it won't be sort of, out there. We're going to be doing it with people who absolutely have no voice. So frankly, that whole I can threaten you into submission has lost its edge. And so now, they're delving even deeper. They're going even sort of down a level in terms of who they victimize and how those victims are being used and abused. Now, make no mistake, attitudes are changing. And they're changing globally. And men in power, men in positions of power, have gotten a couple of rather rude wake-up calls lately. I mean, you have, I don't know, it feels to me like there have been 5 or 6, maybe 10, really kind of big names, prominent names, who have been exposed recently. And so others, in those kinds of power positions have started to sit up and take notice and say, you know what, I am going to become ostracized by this behavior. Again, does it stop it? I'm not so sure, but I think it drives it further underground. However, slowly but surely, things are going to change. Remember, I am young enough to remember when smoking in a doctor's office, that usually the doctor smoked, was considered normal. It was considered acceptable. All right? Just remember that. There is an evolution that we're going through. It's just slow. This is the thing about change. People often think that change happens by revolutions. It really doesn't. It happens, it's an evolution. It takes time because there is a re-education process that needs to go on. Now, really drilling down into Washington and the power brokers there. Don't be surprised if you see bills being written. Perhaps there are some that have died on McConnell's desk to strengthen the laws with regards to this kind of behavior, to really ramp up the enforcement, put more revenue and focus on helping the victims. The law is going to step in and do what they can. Honestly, as long as Republicans are in power, do not expect any significant improvement or change because Trump has absolutely no interest in changing this. He wants the entire thing to die down and be quiet because every time something like this happens, you can't help but think of him. And there is sort of that slimy reflection, right? Kind of almost doesn't matter what the name of the perpetrator is. Somewhere in the back of your mind, Trump gets hooked into it, okay? And so he doesn't want any attention paid to this, and he is going to use whatever strength he has to ensure that it is not. And unfortunately, there are enough people who have their own skeletons who are not going to push it. So anticipate that this is going to continue to be more of a grassroots movement forward until you get some more enlightened souls in positions of power within governments. And that not only includes your federal government, but it includes your state governments, your city governments, etc. And frankly, that also is not exclusive to the United States. There are other countries who are taking their P's and Q's from what's going on and deciding that they too kind of need to step up their game because this is becoming, and as it should, a cause that is getting a lot of attention and something that there really needs to be this sort of pushback against, okay? Expect more news or more accusations or more information coming out about Trump. And I actually think a couple of other rather prominent Republicans, and again, I'm not exempting the Democrats, but right now, the issue is that the Democrats are at least trying to do something. The Republicans are in full pushback mode, right? They're either pushing it back or they're ignoring it. But these 10 of Wands represent communications, information that is going to come out, and it's going to increase the burden Trump carries. Just as simple as that. I don't know if how some of the legal cases are going against him that have been brought about by some of his victims, but I know that he was ordered to hand over DNA in the Carol case, I think is her last name. And I'm sure he's probably trying to run that all the way up to the Supreme Court too, because he seems to think that that's where, he has people in place that he can help him get away with this stuff. And of course, Kavanaugh being there, that tells you right there what's going on there. But expect Trump to face some significant disappointments in terms of court cases, in terms of legal battles, and even in terms of the public reaction to some of this information that's coming out. Because again, this is the thing, right? As long as nobody was actually being punished, it could be pushed to the side. But you have high profile people who have lost their jobs, who have lost their reputations, who have lost their freedom over this behavior. And so again, the evolution of understanding and growth is putting this whole movement in a place where what was acceptable, or not even acceptable, but what a blind eye was turned to, okay, where people just turned their faces and said, that's their business, it's private. That whole attitude is gone. And so there's going to be more information, and there's going to be some really disappointments that he experienced as a result. He, of course, thought that he could threaten, use his power, throw money at some of these situations and make them go away. And to be fair, he was kind of successful with that for quite a long time, because it's not like he started this perverse behavior 10 or 15 years ago. This has been going on his whole life. So, he's gotten away with a lot. But again, emotional responses and attitudes are changing, and it is going to really, really put him in a place where he's not going to have a lot of wiggle room. I would not be at all surprised as you move closer to the election, if some of this kind of opposition research behavior, if that doesn't actually start coming out against him. Because make no mistake, the reporters who have been following these kinds of stories are not going to say, okay, done. They're carrying on, they're continuing, and there's going to be more information coming out about Trump and his shenanigans, and it is going to make him insane, okay? He is going to become so belligerent and so out of control in his responses, and really it's going to cause people to just look at him with pity and disgust and shake their heads. And in a way that verbal diarrhea that spews out of his mouth from his unhinged brain, that's a good thing, because what he's doing is he's giving the victims ammunition to not only sue him for the wrong, but now to sue him for defamation. Women are gaining power, they're gaining control, and you know what? They're not going to tolerate it. They're turning to the law. They're turning to the media. They are getting their stories told. And I would not also be surprised to see if statutes of limitations on some of this stuff gets relooked at, revisited, so that the statutes become longer. The time becomes longer because of the trauma that is experienced by the victims. Very, very often they cannot react on a dime to the abuse. And again, I repeat, so this card represents almost literally a not going back to that behavior, and a recognition that a lot of the people that sort of perpetrated it and tried to make it acceptable, they're dying out, and they're being imprisoned, and they're losing, they're losing reputations, assets, etc. Make no mistake, here's one of my trump cards. In terms of relationships, there's still a great deal that we don't know, but it's also not going to stay secret very long. And again, he's going to be another one like Harvey, who runs around going, but I'm innocent, but I'm innocent. How could this happen to me? I'm innocent. And, bull crap. He's not innocent. And there's going to be a lot of pushback and struggle and kind of fighting going on behind the scenes as people are going to try to get Trump to move on into this millennium. And try to adjust and adapt some of those really antiquated ideas. And, it's not going to happen, because he is one dog that you absolutely cannot teach new tricks to. Okay, so thank you so very, very much for joining me, for being here. The likes, the subscribes, the subscriptions are fabulous. Your comments are witty and clever, and I read every single one of them. So until next time, thank you so much. Take care, be well, and we'll see you really soon. Bye.